Hello again, everybody. This is Steve Grizzetti, co-founder of MoviePix.com and author of the MoviePix.com Guide to CyberLink PowerDirector. And here we are in CyberLink PowerDirector in part 2 of an 8-part series we're calling Basic Training for CyberLink PowerDirector. We are at the welcome screen, which launches by default when you launch the program. And we explored some of the other features here in part 1. In part 2, let's talk about actually opening a project and getting into a project. Now, the nice thing about CyberLink PowerDirector is that it can assimilate or take in almost any kind of media. It's very, very versatile that way. About the only thing you need to do to set up your project is decide what the aspect ratio is. The aspect ratio has to do with basically the shape. Is it going to be more square? Is it going to be taller than wide? Is it going to be wider than tall? And you can see these options for setting up a new project right here on this main menu or on the welcome screen. 16 by 9 is the standard for high-def video. It's the shape of your TV set. This is what I almost always use when I'm setting up videos. But there's also a cinema wide 21 by 9. That's extra wide, like a movie screen. 1 by 1, which is box or square shaped. 4 by 5, which is just a little taller than it is wide. These you might use on Instagram or on Facebook. 9 by 16, that's when you hold your phone upright, like you shouldn't do. But if you shoot video with your phone held upright, this will set up a project to match video that is portrait, taller than wide. 4 by 3 is the old standard for video back when TVs were analog and almost never seen anymore, but it's there if you need it. 360 is one of the more advanced editing workspaces in PowerDirector. You can edit video that wraps completely around the audience, in which they can watch either with VR glasses or they can decide what they look at. There's even a 3D editor built into CyberLink PowerDirector. But let's go ahead and launch the timeline video editor. This is the workhorse, the workspace, the main workspace where you'll probably be doing most of your serious video editing. Now you notice it opened right into a project for me. Generally it opens into a blank project, but I have my preferences set up for the program to open into the project that I'm working on right now. And you can do that by going to the cog that's up here in the upper right hand corner. This will open up your preferences, and here under project you can set up the option to automatically load the last project when PowerDirector opens. Now your timeline in PowerDirector is set up so that the lowermost timeline or the lowermost track, video track 1, is actually at the top of the timeline here, and then the tracks that you'll layer on top of them are below it on the timeline. That's non-traditional. Once you get used to it, it's very easy to get used to. But if you would prefer a more traditional timeline where you're actually building layers from the bottom up, you can switch the look of the timeline by going here again to the cog. And under editing, select the option to reverse the timeline track order. That will put track 1 at the bottom and the other tracks building onto that. So there's some nice options here for customizing your timeline if that's what you prefer. I'm going to leave it at its default setting because I'm kind of used to it actually. Now, most of the time you're going to be editing in timeline mode. That means each clip is represented by its width on the timeline. The wider the clip, the longer the clip. This helps you, especially when you're working on multiple tracks. This helps you to get an idea of how things are going to layer on top of each other. But some people just want to assemble clips, or maybe early in the project you just want to assemble clips. If you want to do that, you can switch it over to storyboard mode just by clicking on the tab button on your keyboard. This is storyboard mode, and here the emphasis is simply on content. What order do you want these clips in? And you can just drag things from the media room up here at the top of the screen down to the timeline and place them in any order, and then drag them around and change their order. So if your emphasis is on just assembling media, that's where you can do it there in storyboard mode. And sometimes it's quicker if you're just trying to throw together a project. To switch back to timeline mode, we just hit the tab key again, and we're back here in timeline mode where I've got my video here, some of it edited and trimmed. I've got my narration running through on track 2. I've got some music there on track 3, and I may even have, I haven't put them in yet, titles, and those might go on another upper track like track 4. But that's just an overall look at the timeline itself. You can, of course, resize these panels by dragging on the little grippers in between each panel. You'll see those little 5 dots there, and you can resize things any way you want to put the emphasis on whatever panel you happen to be working on at the time. In part 3, I want to take you through and just introduce you to the rooms, which are up here in the upper left-hand corner. These rooms are where you're going to find your effects and your music and your titles, and where you're going to do some of your more advanced work. We'll take a look at that here in part 3 as we continue with our 8-part basic training for CyberLink PowerDirector. See you in part 3.